Yes, hello everyone. Good Saturday. This is Mihail Giu, and this is my guest and mentor, Scott Killaby.
Yeah.
So this is part two. If you are interested in this dialogue, I encourage you to see part one. That's on YouTube. And just briefly, this is a dialogue in a series called Psychotherapy and Non-Duality, which is meant for people who are either practitioners, clinicians, or they are interested in awakening, liberation, resonating with these teachings of Advaita Vedanta, non-duality, direct path, at the intersection with, processing trauma, processing our addiction, somehow not having these fields so separate, like shadow work, somatic psychotherapy, addiction work, trauma work, and awakening work, liberation, and reaching, becoming a Buddha, whatever. Somehow they seem to be, I see that they need each other and they need to be integrated. And I see that Scott in his approach has the same philosophy. And yeah, so that's the context. And especially this dialogue is geared for people who are already somehow familiar with or interested in somatic psychotherapy, perhaps in the form of Peter Levine's somatic sensing, or Hakomi modality, which is mindfulness-based somatic psychotherapy, or people who are already working with Scott, KI inquiries, or working with Scott's facilitators. So this talk will go in more depth with some of the main tools used by Scott and his approach, as well as, so we are going to go into why it works and how to use it skillfully, and also some of the clinical theory behind it. So yeah, so once again, thank you, Scott, for agreeing to talk to me. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Mihai.
So, since our last talk, I actually started working with you, and that, yeah, deepened my, I was already very interested in this approach and I was using it with clients, but now being on the side of the couch or chair of the client, I could really experience it from the other side thoroughly, and I could see how, how effective. And it right away after just one session with you as a client, next day when I went to work, or even the same day when I went to work, I started to work a little differently with clients. So yeah, I would like to, one of the topics, one of the tools and main, let's say, tenets of your modality is what is called reverse inquiry. And so from what I understand, reverse inquiry is, once, let's say, we have identified some limiting belief, once I identify the limiting belief, like, which could be either I'm unlovable, I'm not good enough, I'm broken, I'm something wrong with me, or it could be a relational limiting belief, like, I have to hide, it's not safe to be vulnerable, don't trust them. So it could be about self or the world. So once we identified something like that, then you are turning that belief around. You are reversing it intentionally. Yeah. So let's say if I had, it's not safe to be real, I can switch it and say, it's safe to be real. It's safe to be vulnerable. So I just turn it around, and we are basically, your modality is to feed this statement to the client while the client is somehow in a mindful space, or as you call it, resting as awareness. So the mind is more clear, they are present, and then you are feeding it to them, or they can say it out loud. It's safe to be real with my girlfriend. And then simply wait, and basically this reverse inquiry is meant to stir and evoke to the surface what you call the worm, the worm,
the worms.
the
Yeah.
worms, yeah, which is it's like, it's almost like when a dealership, when you go to a dealership in these modern cars, and you go to a dealership and then they plug you, and then it gives you the corrupt codes. You know, you have this corrupt code where you know what the problem is. So somehow one aspect of this reverse inquiry is that you can identify if there's an issue in that channel. So anyway, I started talking now about the reverse inquiry. Could you speak a little about the actual technique itself, and also maybe about the preparations for doing this technique, and why?
Maybe let's talk about the preparation secondly, because I think it goes to for people who might not be able to listen to me and catch on, and
Yeah.
because they might need some preparatory meditative work or something.
Yeah.
But for me, the worm, let's talk about the worm metaphor so that we can clear that up for everybody. Because I grew up as a kid who fished all the time. That's what this comes from, frankly. And so when you go out into a field and you can see the field, but you can't see that there are a whole bunch of worms in the field, because the worms are everywhere in our earth, but you can't see them. So these reverse inquiries are like worm food as a metaphor. You just put the food over the ground and here they come. And I think that's one reason we should make the distinction between like shadow work and Byron Katie's work, because people do get confused because there's a similarity. But the one key difference is when you're saying the opposite. So let's say you believe you're not good enough, and for you, the opposite, I'm perfect as I am. We don't say that to affirm it right off the bat. So a lot of modalities there, well, not just positive affirmations, but in other modalities, you're sort of trying to affirm something which your body doesn't agree with, is what I find. So you can try to affirm it and hope that the body comes into alignment, but there's a lot of stuff, as we know, that's hanging on to this that doesn't allow us to affirm. So what we want to do is be aware of all that stuff that comes up when we say I'm perfect as I am. It's like you said, to rest with the objections that say, no, you're not. And dad thought you were a failure, and memories, words, pictures that come up in response to that. So we're not affirming it. We're using that as a way it's like a thorn to remove a thorn. You're, in a way, you're just introducing this thorn or this statement as a way to see and pull up these thorns that make it feel true and real. I have to say that I was surprised myself in my own path, even after having had a non-dual realization and abiding in awareness. I was actually surprised myself to see when I started to reverse a few things that there was still some stuff on stuff, and I thought, well, if this is surprising me, and if this is opening up my own experience, surely other people can benefit. That's how it felt like, because you almost become a beginner. It feels like with this work, it's like I have to start again here, because there's just these questions are designed to pull up things I think that we may not normally see. And so that's what's helpful, is pulling up things that we don't normally see, and then how we relate to those things as they come up. It's also important, but we'll get to that in a second.
Can I say something here? Yeah, that's important. This reverse inquiry may seem like a positive affirmation that will boost my self-esteem, or will feel yummy, and a little soothing, So I make sure to, especially with new people that I work with, to say, hey, this would be like a good statement. It may sound like a positive affirmation, but I'm not telling this to convince you or to make you feel good. Actually, this statement is meant to evoke your subconscious believing the very opposite.
Yeah.
So we can witness it.
Perfect.
And so here you are saying it comes, rest with it one at a time. At some point, can you go into this? Because for some people, that they may not get this rest with it one at a time,
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the other foundational work that's part of what we do, which is the resting as awareness, the calm abiding, the allowing things. Like, so what I'm normally, if for those people who are interested in the awakening in the body, the process, there, so what I'll do for them is I'll help them develop a practice of resting as awareness throughout the whole day, like make it a practice in your life. So that one of the things about the awake state is what I tell people, if you were to mimic that in your everyday life, what it's like is there's a lot of just nothing going on sometimes. And then when things come up, you can see them pretty much better. You can see them. Like if a thought comes up, unless I'm really triggered, because that happens sometimes where I can't see it, most of the time you can see it. So in the awake state, it's like the awareness is already here always. And then something comes up and you can see it and you're able to isolate it because you don't have a lot of clutter going on sometimes. So I understand that when I describe it that way, of resting with one thought at a time, if someone doesn't have that awareness, that might be difficult. But at the same time, if they have this practice over here where they're cultivating the recognition of awareness, like throughout the day, then it might not be that much of a stretch to then when they go into inquiry, because they're already resting in that throughout the day, to just return to that and look from that one thing at a time. So frankly, a lot of people can do it, but there are certain, you mentioned someone in your ranks who's having some difficulty with the one at a time thing.
Yeah.
And in our training program, that's not part of the tools that I say everyone should have to do. Like I don't, when we train people, we don't tell them, not yet at least, to have everybody work with one thing at a time, because I kind of know that everybody's different. You have to meet them where they're at. But it's really more of Scott's style, the one at a time so far,
Yeah.
because it hasn't been brought into the whole program. I can tell you about why I do it and why it helps me, or people that are able to do it, how why it helps them. But we still have to address those folks who have difficulty with that.
Yeah.
Still have to.
Can I interject here before you go why one at a time? So I guess what you call resting as awareness can be seen depending where people are at. So some people listening to Eckhart Tolle, or they go to Vipassana, or they go to Zen, they may have this called mindfulness practice, or trying to witness. They are being aware, witnessing, noticing thoughts and sensations in the body and sounds, and being in the here and now. So it seems like many people can connect to that so-called mindfulness, although they are not aware that I am this awareness that is watching. There is not clear who am I. They are not looking there, but there's a noticing of content, which by itself, this will be enough to start doing your inquiries. And other people, they are having this witnessing of content, but they had some glimpses about what we are. So there's the, okay, I'm witnessing, but I am the witnessing. Yeah. So that's where you are coming from.
Brilliant way you just broke that down. So yeah, so I think let's speak to the folks who have some difficulty. Like if you have some practice of mindfulness, you should be able to do this inquiry to get started on it. You don't have to have that recognize that awareness as foundational, because in fact, even as you start doing the inquiry, it can help to establish that awareness a little bit more, just doing the inquiry.
Yes.
So you could be completely identified and then just start noticing and asking some questions, and then it clears away a chunk of whatever that was making you kind of stay in that ego state, just getting a little bit more presence with each time you do it. So that's why I do encourage people, even if they don't have a
Yeah.
strong sense of the presence, to go ahead and start. But then I'll also then encourage them to go, we have like free meditations. Lynn Fraser has for years given natural rest meditations where all that she's doing is not a lot of inquiry, some, it's just like, you know, a meditative practice where people
Yeah.
are going to notice and feel. So they're flexing that muscle to help prepare them for doing this work, or maybe they have a different meditative practice. I just encourage them. I don't want anybody to do this work where they're feeling overwhelmed, where they, you know, it's just slow down, let's go and do something else first and come to this when the overwhelm is not likely to happen as much. So it's really, it is case by case. And you know that as a therapist, you really have to do that with people.
Yeah, you know, actually, I was coming from this Hakomi awareness-based somatic psychotherapy, which was not meant, the creators of it were probably deeply on a spiritual path, but they wanted to make it available for everybody, to be more like a mainstream thing. So it's it was not just for people who want enlightenment. So that's why they were teaching, like, before you do this somatic inquiry, it's because it's not talk therapy. You need to drop in a little bit, and they call it, before processing from awareness, you need to establish mindfulness, get more conscious. So a little bit of guided meditation to get in the right space, because these inquiries are, I mean, I guess everybody who are watching us, they know it's not just open-eyed thinking about it, more like closed eye, being like in meditation, but it's stirring. You are stirring the worms.
Yeah, exactly. So, I guess that is one of the issues is, does this work for everybody at every time? And no, that's the answer. It's not, because some people just need preparatory work.
Yes.
But I also don't want to scare people away, because again, doing the inquiry helps with the recognition of awareness. So yeah, but there may be certain people even that you're finding that they're just not quite ready for this for whatever reason. So
Yes, I mean, I have some people who actually have done a lot of work, and non-dual work and Byron Katie work, and a friend of mine who told me, hey, I would like to ask Scott this. Like, he says, okay, just go inside and rest as awareness and let the thought bubble in and out. And he was like, it's not like that for me. I'm just, it's static. And so I guess here there's this preparation for this deprogramming, reverse inquiry, to, you can't do it from just, being in the traffic and checking a cell phone and Facebook, and now you go into reverse inquiry. It's not going to work. So need some acclimatization. So a little bit of just anything. And I like how you did it with me. Whatever you need to do to restless awareness, kind of do it. Yeah.
well, for somebody else, I might guide them a little bit more,
Yeah.
right? But with you, it's like I felt like you could probably just drop in.
Yeah.
But that brought something up that you just said, if I can remember what it was, and it just eludes me now.
My friend with the static and
That's it. So yes, so some people can't do it, but then also we've built in some tools to kind of mimic it until it starts happening naturally. And one of the tools is not one of your favorites, but it does help people with metaphysical hands. So I do work with people who don't have that established awareness, and so I have to help them with these tools. So if I do a reverse inquiry for them, like say I'm lovable, too much overwhelm, too much going on, lots of different thoughts, feelings, can't stop. Well, obviously I could say, well, then go establish a meditative practice, but I don't want to give up on them because we have some tools. And one of the tools is like, okay, let's say an image comes up, and when an image comes up, some other things might want to come up. But if you imagine two hands or put your real hands like they're assimilating being around the image, for example, or even words, it brings it into focus. And with the hands, it's like a frame for a picture, and it helps your awareness stably stay with the thing. And even if the image moves, your hands can move with it, which reduces resistance. If other things pop up, you can notice them and allow them, and then come back to the hands. That helps. And sometimes that's all that people need to begin,
yeah.
because like, oh, it's just, I'm not good enough. I've never been able to really
Yeah.
see this, and the hands help that. Another one is stream tapping. We took this from one of the ladies that wrote the Faster EFT training manual, was my co-facilitator at the Kilby Center when we opened. And she was just really versed in tapping. And then I started studying it, went back, like it's been around for 4,000 years. It was amazing, the history of this thing. Because you hear about it now, it's like this new thing, tapping. I'm like, well, no, it's actually been around for a long time. So what I was trying to understand about tapping is like, that's a whole protocol. The tapping thing itself can be taken out of that and used within the process of inquiry. One of the things we do is called stream tapping. So if you say, I'm perfect as I am, and here come the flood. No, you're not. Dad was disappointed in you. You're a failure. Flooding that's a stream, like, so to speak. And if you start tapping through the stream, so you just look at one, just there may be a bunch out there, but just look at one, rest with it for a short bit, return to the tapping, just as a way to help unhook a bit from that. But also the tapping, if you notice it for a while, starts to show you a little space,
Yeah.
because you're not You're not with content.
Yeah.
You're with sound and sensation, which doesn't give you a place to go with content in the mind. So you get that moment of a space between thoughts or with a thought, and then that thought might eventually fall down, and you just look at another one there that's really prominent and come back to the tapping. So the tapping helps as a resource between
Yeah.
each thought to come back, a safe resource. And then that mimics the awake state in the sense that, okay, even though your actual consciousness doesn't do that, when you start tapping, you start experiencing and relating like that, one thing at a time
Yeah.
with a tapping in between. So that helps. And
Yes.
a lot of people do that too to start. But then we try to wean them off of these little tools, training wheels.
Yeah.
Eventually, as the cultivation of awareness starts to happen, we say, don't use the crutches as much and rest and rely on just
Yes.
awareness.
Yes, I can see how clinically speaking, the frame, uh, and I tell people, especially when I know the images will be painful and disturbing from childhood, the trauma images, tell them beforehand, hey, remember, whatever you're going to see is just pictures or images. And the good news is you already survived, and these images cannot hurt you. You are aware of it.
Yeah.
But these frames or the hands, they make that more clear distinction that, hey, I'm watching the zombies on the movies. I'm not in the movie,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
And I have started to implement this, although I wasn't a fan of tapping before, because I associated it with trying to get rid of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to witness stuff and not get rid of stuff. But whenever, let's say, okay, I don't feel safe. The client said, I don't feel safe. It's like something. And I say, okay, so welcome the file of not feeling safe and allow any images connected to this. This can be like, uh-oh. So of course, we need to track the level of resourcefulness of the
Yeah.
client
Yes.
and to ensure safety. And I found that I would say, I would, yeah, tap here as a way to not be totally sucked into the movie. And I like how you say it. Notice the images and also notice the sound of tapping and notice the sensation of tapping and notice the space in which the sensations come,
Sure.
So I like that it and I notice for people this helps them to they can handle it, that they can
Yes.
handle the and then also at some point it almost, if they had sensation in the body or activation in the body, that may discharge some of it. Although I know you are doing this, I'm doing this too now. So first address the mental formations,
Mm-hmm.
and when they subside, to go into see what's in the body.
Right, because that's to me is like we're more unconscious stuff. So I always say like some of the more conscious stuff that comes up willingly.
Yeah.
See, like you said, but then some stuff doesn't come up as willingly like
Yes.
that. So you have to dig a little bit deeper. So yeah, that would be time when
Yeah.
I would go down and explore. Yeah.
So let's go back to this thing, which actually like one at a time. Because although I heard you many times and somehow I knew that, somehow I could see that I wasn't quite doing it like that. And it was very important to, it's safe to be real, or I can express anger with somebody, to have like, no, you can't. And somehow to stop there rather that, oh no, it's never been like that. He was an asshole and he was drinking all the time, scared of him. You see, this is no longer going into witnessing, it's just going into the mind and like now talk therapy with the eyes closed. So and I had a session with you and I was going slow, but you told me, hey, are you witnessing? And I was like, no. So I got more and really and you this prompt that you have, it's very powerful both for releasing trauma but also for awakening this
Yeah.
thing that to see how out of nothing they say it's safe to be myself. There's nothing and then something comes and you see the appearance of the something and to stay with it until it goes away by itself, and then to see the disappearing of that thing somehow, to see that's very powerful, although we may not realize why it is very important. can you talk about that?
I can, because this was a discovery in my own experience. I don't feel like it's theoretical at all for me. It's when so with the chronic pain, I had a really serious chronic pain issue that was tied to anger, repression, and other things like that. So when I first encountered a thought that came up that said, I hate my dad, I had never encountered that thought. And so it did not make sense to me, knowing that that was repressed before, to jump over that or skip over it or do anything other than fully allow it in awareness, because it had been previously repressed. I was just going on a hunch at first, just like a hunch, like that doesn't make sense to be moving through things quickly. But then it was more than a hunch, because as the thought would fall down, I was, you know how when you're watching a thought, when it fall away, you're also connected to a sensation with this work. You're feeling into it. And so I could actually detect the changes that would happen. There wouldn't be as many changes when, you know, how you get out and there's just words or out there and people say, well, it doesn't mean anything. Well, then I'll say, well, stay with it. Then if it doesn't mean anything, why are we turning away from something that was previously repressed? So if they stay with it, they notice that too, is as the thought falls away, something happens in the system where whatever's connected to that can shift if you come to the space after. But if you jump from one thought to the next thought, it might not give the body time to settle what it needs to settle
Yeah.
with regard to each thought. And the other thing you mentioned, which is a different way of saying what I love the way you said it, is I see this all the time in inquiry with people, and you catch on to it after a while. Like a thought comes up, I'm not safe. And then the mind starts producing a bunch of other thoughts around it. And then that's the experience in therapy or in session where someone will say, I'm not safe. He was an asshole. I'm never going to be safe. Blah, blah, blah. Therapy with your eyes closed.
Mm-hmm.
But from awareness, what's happening is like, oh, this is how it remains real to us. Because if it really only appeared as this one thought, it might not be as persuasive. But it comes up with this one thought, and then here comes all the proof around it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's exactly how you stay in the belief. Is just sitting here going like this sometimes, because it's like trying to prove it to you. Even while you're witnessing, it'll try to prove it to you. What I say is
Yeah.
that if you take one thing at a time, it doesn't get to build its blocks in the same way. It doesn't get to do that in the same way. So one at a time allows you just to see each thing for what it is, an object and awareness. And it does, but I still know that when we're resting, sometimes it does that. And
Mm-hmm.
we have to contend with that when it comes up. You can't
Mm-hmm.
just say, well, just one at a time if all this is coming up. And that's where the stream tapping comes in, or
Mm-hmm.
the other tools, or coaching, to one at a time. But just telling people that, saying, do you see what's happening? It's like a thought comes up that you're not good enough. And then instead of allowing you to see the thought,
Mm-hmm.
the consciousness is so clever in the sense it says, don't look at that. Just look at all the proof that shows you that it's true,
Mm-hmm.
And so if they hear that, they go, oh, it's always just
Yeah.
kind of proving that that's true. Well, maybe I should just look at that then.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll say, okay, look
Yeah.
at that, because
Yeah. You know what? Also, this what we're just talking now, witnessing one at a time and witnessing the arising of it and the disappearance of it in front of the seeing. So it has processing power, but also I had clients who were not deeply into awakening, but they could get this thing, this thing that it can precipitate some realization about the nature of consciousness. Basically, oh wow, I'm not the thought. Oh wow, this thought came and left, I remain. So it
Mhm.
can have some satori element,
Yeah,
so I really, and it's experiential rather than you talk for 15 minutes in satsang and you explain and people are like, yeah, yeah. But
yeah,
to see it, that's very liberating.
it is. And can I mention something right there? Is I think this is where the intersection between the therapy and the non-duality can come in, because if someone is able to witness one thing at a time, you can also coach them not only just to watch it fall away so the somatic shifts can happen, but then taking a moment, as you say, resting without that, to just being for a moment
Mm-hmm.
in between the thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm doing, because in that moment, you're not processing anything, you're not
Mm-hmm.
looking at anything, you're just recognizing this is the
Yeah.
nature of this. And so if you do that over and over between your inquiry,
Mm-hmm.
that is the awakening piece of it. It's not
Yes.
just therapeutic, it's that too.
Yes. So, yeah. So it's like ego inquiry, falls away. I mean, we are not doing that, but you can say, okay, what is left here? You know, as Ramana said, whatever arises, be interested in that which is aware of it. So it goes like self-inquiry, but we are now more interested in the subconscious shit inquiry, basically. But even if we don't talk about self-inquiry, it's happening somehow. There's the so-called interval, the aware background.
Yeah, and I would definitely, with folks who are interested in awakening, I would probably bring that in as more than I would if somebody wasn't. If somebody was just looking to process grief around mother, I'm not necessarily going to come back to that "who are you really" thing. But if they are, I would, because they know that they want to process some stuff, but they also know that they're not any of the stuff. So we're going to bring both of those elements in, I think, for those folks.
Yeah. I don't know if you know this guy, David Hawkins. David Hawkins. I used to see him before he died, and so I remember he was having this. We'll get to reverse inquiry. Yeah, I got it. We're just talking about this preparation, let's say. So he had this, and I was very impressed as a young man with his. I was talking that you are watching, and you notice the first thought as it arises, and then you don't let it go into a story like Old Rover, the dog. Oh, it was run by a truck. Oh, and we all cried. So he was saying that as you get more skilled, before even the Old Rover image arises, you are kind of catching it. So I was like, wow, that's awesome. I should try to do that. So I tried hard, and I couldn't quite catch it. It was just, it was already here. And so a few years ago, I asked my my spiritual non-dual teacher Francis Lucille. I said, hey, I was trying to catch this stuff, and it's hard to catch it. Is it a good practice? And he said this, yeah, it's a good practice, but try to do the opposite. He said, try, instead of catching it when it comes, try when it's here, notice how it fades away and leaves you like a wave reaches the shore. And I was like, I never thought about that. So I tried that, which is similar to what we are doing here with you, to notice the disappearance of thought. And then you are left with what we are. So anyway, I could see that that was happening much more effortlessly, and it was spontaneously. So it's a lot of benefit in that. The previous one, trying to catch it, I was, I guess, doing it from the mind. So it's like with the dog trying to catch its tail, it's too late already,
What was Hawking saying after you catch it? What was the practice? You catch it, and then what?
Well, David Hawkins was talking in terms of this, he was the deep contemplative states in seclusion by himself. And then he was just every content, you surrender as it arises, both mental and at the same time, he was allowing, I'm sure he was allowing all the pain body, But yeah, the idea was to not get identified with the mind, and the mind is like flying fish, and not to go with the fish,
Yeah, this method would be more like how Francis is saying plus some, because what we're saying is, allow the current thing to come up, but we're saying, no, go ahead and conjure the rest of the unconscious up around it and rest with that. And the reason I like Francis is because I don't, like you say, Hawkins may have been instructing to allow the body, but what we know about trauma being stored in the body and repression now, I feel like Francis, the way he's talking about it, would be better for repression, at least for me.
Yeah. Okay, so let's come back to, so in a nutshell, for people using this somatic reverse inquiry from awareness, or any type of, somatic awareness-based exploration of our unconscious, it's good to kind of put the cell phone down before the session, ideally, and drop in a little bit. So you are more in a more mindful here and now space. The worm, there will be less static to interfere with the worms, Yeah. Although I must say, I work with some people who had a lot of trauma or stuff that I could see that they go inside and then they come outside. and I see them, they are like, they're coming outside. And even with such clients, I noticed that this reverse inquiries and stuff, it still works. They go inside for a moment, they come outside, it still, it produces worms. And yeah.
Yeah. Well, the first point you made is like, it is difficult, especially when you first start doing this, or if there's no recognition of, not much recognition of awareness, to be right in the middle of your day to just pop into inquiry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and you're absolutely right. Because so even when I had tons of pain, I literally had to get quiet and go somewhere and look at this because it was so deep. But at the same time, once you get better at it and there's more awareness, you can start to do it in
Yeah.
like just hearing something in your mind,
Yeah.
and then just reversing it while you're walking and just looking, or while you're at a computer, stopping and looking for a second. You can actually start to incorporate it after a while, but at
Yeah.
first, definitely get
Yeah.
quiet. And I forgot what the second point was.
Sorry, I'm going with I could see some obstacles or something to watch out for people witnessing the worm thoroughly. Is like this phenomena of, I have some people, they go inside and they say, what's the first thing that comes up? And they say something followed by another 2 paragraphs.
Mm-hmm.
So here I am, of course, you need to have rapport with the person. So I'm like, hey, stop, please stop. You are going to your mind. So I'm, so this can work if you have rapport. Otherwise, it's like, hey, dude,
Yeah.
this, it's not, it's not empathetic. But I could see that I needed to do that and over. So another interesting phenomena, I did it actually yesterday with someone to inquire into the utility of, what's the utility of hiding or manipulating, relationship or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's just, he said, oh, I get my way and I do what I want and and so it came like this. And then he said, oh, fuck, it's so fucking selfish, man. And so he went with that. So I told him, hey, stop, just see that. And then that's another
Yeah.
thought too.
Right.
Judge. So basically judging what comes, judging and now being identified as the judgment. So that's important to not judge what we witness, because then the witnessing stops. It's kind of blame, I'm such an asshole and stuff.
Yeah, I see it all the time. It's nobody's ever asked me that in an interview. So you must be doing the work with people, because that's exactly what happens. So what I'm noticing is that do a reverse inquiry, as you say, several things come up, and then there's like a landing point, or what's it say, is like it pivots into mind at that point. And that's
Say it
fine.
again.
But like there's a landing on a certain thought and a pivoting out of inquiry and into talking and reporting, So it'd be like, okay, I'm losing my business. Okay, I'm not losing my business. Yes, I am. Blah, 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 blah. You're witnessing things are coming and going. And then like, everybody owes me money. And that's the landing point. And then from there, it's believed in that moment, there's no awareness to that. And then we're off and running. So what I tell people is like, if I'm here with you, I can coach you back to it. But what are you going to do on your own when that happens?
Yeah.
And part of it is just talking to people and saying, for me, it's like, when I start talking about something, I'm reinforcing a belief. This is how we do it. We literally utter a bunch of things in a row that make up a belief. We have to utter several things in a row. Like, you notice that? Like when someone believes something, they don't just say it once. They say something and then other proof after that, and the mind is off.
Because of the evidence of why this is true.
Yeah. So with me not being there to coach them, I just have to talk to them about that so that they can catch it on their own. In fact, if you found anything on that to help them, let me know. But usually it's just by saying it in session, by saying, so see, there's your landing. There was a landing thought, and then now you've pivoted out. And all you're doing is going from witnessing to reporting, but you're not looking anymore. And all of these will need to be witnessed at this point. And so it's actually just more efficient to catch it yourself. And instead of going off on a rant, which happens, it's fine, is to catch it and just stay in the witnessing. Greg Good said something to me. He was a teacher I had he says something in his Direct Path book that I repeat. he says like, look, we're witnessing A, B, C, but then D tries to tie everything together and conclude, and then it's D that we don't witness. So if you could just treat each of the arisings as witnessable arisings instead of some of them are special, that can help too.
Yeah, and it's this unwitnessed special D bubble that is the one that becomes me again. You know, instead of me being the witnessing, now it's the me being the bubble.
And I would say not only that, is that when there's that me or that bubble, you can usually notice that there's utility strongly connected to it. There's a reason, a benefit. And then if you back up, you can get people to look at utility. They can start to see why they went off on that rant, because no, I've survived this way. Like, this is how I protected myself. This is how I get love. And now once they look at that, the ranting can quiet down because the utility has been seen. So.
Okay, I want to bookmark this, the utility and reverse inquiry as a 1-2. I'll bookmark this, but another, let's say, obstacle in witnessing one at a time, I notice sometimes, so that's why I ask people at the beginning, I want them to tell me, rather than just be silent, to tell me what comes up. Sometimes they give me a narrated version of their thought. It's not the raw. There's nothing, and I ask them, so anything came up? They say, yeah, you know, it was about this. I was like, no. To go back to it, what's the actual raw data? You know, so yeah, that's important to report the actual thought rather than the narration on the thought, you know? Yeah.
Very nuanced. Yes. Trying to think if I can add anything to that. To give an example would be nice for people so they could catch it, but I can't think of one right now. Yeah, well, somewhere I see it as like the thought is I'm not good enough, or I'm a failure, something like that. But instead of they start talking about facts, like, well, he said this and he did that and he did that. That's fine. You can look at all that, but what's it all pointing to? The central core belief, value, judgment, not yourself.
Yeah.
That's one example. There's probably other examples.
You know, like an example, let's say it's safe. Let's say you would drop the inquiry, it's safe to express towards my dad, and then the client is silent. I ask them what's up, and they say, no, it wasn't, you know. But I could see that hey, what was the thought? And they were like, no way. Okay, so let's stay with this. No way, written on the screen, or you know. So that I don't know. Once I started to actually do it with you, I could really see, I don't know, much more clearly what needs to happen. Oh, and actually you helped me, I remember, with the landing spot, because at some point I started to share with you a little story, a memory, a bunch of thoughts. And then you told me, okay, okay, which one is more charged there? So, and then we went back to the charged thought, you know, to stay into,
Yeah, because when you're on your own, that's sometimes challenging. I found that too, because we can each get off on a tangent. But also say to people, look, if you're inquiring on your own, you get off on a tangent, you don't have to make a big deal out of that. You just come right back to whatever you need to, because people will judge themselves for that, as you know, like, I can't do it. I can't. Yeah, that's a good point. That's very nuanced questions here. Like, until you're really doing it with people.
It's for people that are doing this, and your people are doing it. So just had another thought here. It's gone. Yeah, I want to, or maybe some of the people that are Hakomi therapists watching this. And so when I studied this was like 6-7 years ago for a few years. And in that modality, they had this called probes. So for any Hakomi practitioners, you guys know what I'm talking about. Probes. Although recently I found out from somebody that they changed the name to probes because maybe it was not politically correct or psychotherapeutically correct.
Really?
Yeah, anyway, it's irrelevant. I learned it as probes. But the probe was like this, like a probe is like you say a statement, like you drop a pebble in the water, and then there will be ripples. So the statement is like you drop a probe into the subconscious. So which is exactly like what you call reverse inquiry. But in this Hakomi, this probe, it was supposed to use, let's say, as a tool to have a feeling where do they have limiting core material. So it's more like as an to assess where it bites. So where the therapist will, after having some experience with the client a little bit, but not sure where is the most pain, where the most inflamed area, is it trust, is it vulnerability, is it safety, is it whatever. So the therapist will say, close your eyes, get more mindful. I'm going to say this statement and notice whatever comes up. And so it's a little preamble to be done. And then the therapist says it like, Scott, notice what, says it again. So it's a preparation. You are lovable just the way you are. And then if for the client, it comes like nothing, or yeah, it means that there is no wound there. Yeah. So then it's fine. We can keep going somewhere else. But if the client has like a no or some ouch, stabbing or contraction, it means that this signals the presence of wound material in that thing. So that was a way to determine. And then once there was something evoked, they call it in Hakomi, it evokes core material. It's evoked into awareness, and then the idea was to process it by mining it and going into other things. And when was the first time, and what's the memory, and where is it into the body? But somehow they dropped the probe. They will use the probe once or twice, and then they will leave it once that was evoked material. And then we would do, as they call it, processing at the core, or childhood processing at the core. So, and I did that, but what is a little bit different with the reverse inquiry is that we don't abandon the reverse inquiry once it evoked things. Actually, I can see that we use the reverse inquiry over and over and over because it will keep stirring something. So it will keep mining it out, basically. So it's not just a tool to evoke subconscious material, but it's a tool to keep processing, to keep deleting it.
Yeah. So when I think of just dropping a question in and just going with the first things that come up, that would be fine on things that don't have a deep somatic thing. But when with the pain that I was dealing with, just dropping those things in wouldn't have brought me to the other side of it, because it was the repetition of saying, I can feel and express anger. I want to feel anger. I want to feel anger. And just a whole bunch of resistance to that, a whole bunch of no's. It was staying with that brought the relief on the somatic level. So that's the big key. And you know what? I don't think that I felt permission or room to create things like that when I first came to non-duality, because so much of it is about, don't do that. Don't do that. Just be with what is. And when something comes up, look at that a little bit. But the problem is that then the repressions remained in me with that style. It's like the body I did clear all the body contractions from that style. But when it came to the deeper repressions and deeper trauma responses connected to the spine, repetition was the only thing that would work. So it's almost like breaking the rules a little bit, like being okay to break these rules and say, because a lot of people are suffering their bodies, even after years of satsang, years of retreat, years of processing. we need to try some new things, you know, at this point, and
Yeah,
not get stuck in any dogma around it.
yeah, yeah.
I guess in therapy, you guys might be used to repetition in certain modalities, but you don't see it a lot in the spiritual world necessarily.
Well,
I don't know.
I'm now using much more of this so-called probes or reversed inquiry because uh, I find it's more effective and it's less sessions, less
Yeah.
sessions, and we keep going there rather than beating about the bush.
Mhm.
Uh, so basically, what I've done, I know it's not what you recommended, but I wrote a list. This is for my own, as a me, my Mihai, as a client, as a sufferer. So I wrote down 10, 15. You know, there's something wrong with me. It's not safe to be vulnerable. I never have a good relationship. You know, I have to hide. Uh, bunch, because I identified them already. Yeah. So then I had them here, and so can we just reverse each one of them? And basically, I guess lately adapted my sadhana, so I do meditate a little bit because it's nice and like you know, it's like a refuge, right? Buddha was right. But then I I I bring some of those. I bring some of those, and I say, oh, it's. I have no. I don't need to hide. I don't. It's easy to be absolutely honest in my relationship. Anyway, and so I do some of them a few times. So also, by the way, I found out some people ask me, "Hey man, but by myself when I do it, it's just like voices and stuff. It's confusing." So what I found, if one does it by oneself, to say out loud, the reverse inquiry, and maybe even the first thought, to say it out loud because it makes more okay, makes more distinct the thing. I do have, in the morning, I mean, I feel good and I feel a little resistance, like, man, you don't want to do this because it will start some stuff. So, but I'm tired of the shit. It's been there for a long time, in spite of many non-dual retreats. So I do it and it stirs things, but I notice that there is a, afterwards is a more, it's peace, it's back to peace, it's more easy peace, it's not manufactured peace.
Right, that's good.
So what do you
Yeah,
recommend is, incorporating this homework, and if a client already identified certain things?
I like what you said, saying it out loud. Some people do write it down because they just need to. They need to write down some of the responses. Like they'll even, some people will do reverse inquiry on paper, frankly, first, because they can't reach some repressed material because they've learned how to meditate and squeeze it out of
Hmm.
consciousness. But sometimes they need to write things down. So like, I'm lovable. No, I'm not, because. But then they have to translate that and bring it into their experience. This is really for people who, when I start to do a reverse inquiry, like nothing comes up. And then when we're talking, they'll tell me about, yeah, I couldn't get angry when I was a kid with dad. He was scary. And then we go right into inquiry and we'll do the reverse inquiry. I can feel and express anger, quiet, repression, from partly from meditation,
Hmm.
which is, if certain kinds of meditation, I can't articulate this enough, but certain kinds of meditation are open to what arises. There's an alertness and an openness to it. And certain forms are like non-conceptual awareness, almost forced. It's like that
Hmm.
and staying as that. And so if people have cultivated that experience of like just coming back to like this without being open, like in some way to what's arising in the body, whatever, then they may have difficulty. Um, and they may reinforce the repression
Hmm.
through that kind of meditation. It doesn't even have to be meditation. Listening to non-dual teachings talk about non-conceptual awareness, for
Hmm.
example, can create a habit of like deletion, delete, which is like repress. Meanwhile, the body's holding a bunch of stuff. So those folks are benefited by writing it out because they can't bring it in. it won't come up. So they have to bring it in. They literally have to write from the paper. There's the response. Now I can see it. That's one thing that can help if you're not getting things on repression, on things like
Yeah.
that. But saying it out loud, okay, for me, here's the thing about this work is the whole spine thing healed without a lot of coming down into the body. I spent 2 years doing what most people will do, like rest with it, let it be, just whatever. If there's any thoughts that come up naturally, look at them. It wasn't until I went into the repetitious inquiry that I got the healing off of that. So what I needed to do for that was, because this was really deeply unconscious stuff, I would sometimes, because you know how like if I'm not safe will flash through or something flashes through, is I'll sometimes just, people can use this, make it really big. Just do that for yourself if you need to. Make it big letters, I'm unsafe, so that you can't mistake what it is that you're thinking. If you can handle that, sometimes that's overwhelming. Or just explicitly put it somewhere. So some people need to put it on, they need to be able to see it because it's been unconscious. So they'll put it on a billboard or a sign or something so they can really see it. And I wouldn't say you would do that forever, but in the beginning, to become more conscious of your mind, maybe you put it explicitly on things so you can see things exactly.
Yeah, you have this in Kyo series, because even people say witness your thoughts, okay, but this, even like witness thoughts is some abstract thing. There are no thoughts. So you have this Kyo series, like thoughts are actually either a voice in your head that says, oh, don't trust him, oh, they are going to judge you, or you are fat or something. Or some people have, so memories are images, yeah? So they are either images or voices or sometimes words. So
Or
that's
both.
important, that because basically what we call thoughts is just not, there's no thoughts. It's just either, the thoughts are either a voice in your head or an image or something written. And I think, I don't know where I got it from you or from someone else. You know, in Star Wars, when they used to have Star Wars and the writing comes on the screen, it says the Empire. I sometimes use this, like it says, oh, I'm broken. I say, okay, see it like in Star Wars on the desktop of your, I use this, your IMAX, your consciousness IMAX, see it like written, newsflash or something. I think you had this. Yeah, to make this more distinct, that, hey, this is not necessarily true. This is just words. You turn on the TV, there's a lot of words. Doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean it's true, you know? So.
Well, that reminds me of a little tool I used to do. If you ever watched Family Feud, do you know what Family Feud is, the game show?
No, I have gaps in American culture, you know.
Okay. Well, your viewers might, but on Family Feud, families feud against each other to guess answers on the board. And it's like the top 8 answers that are surveyed out and people will appear on the board. And if you guess the answers, you win. Well, speaking of when people get more than one thing at a time, sometimes I'll just have them list the things on the board. You know, anything that visualizes, it's nothing about the Family Feud, but anything that helps them visualize, like you say, to see, it's just data. That's all it is just data, but you've taken it to be you, that data. But once you see it on the billboard or you see it on the Family Feud thing, it's easier sometimes to see it as that. So that's the point. It doesn't matter if it's Family Feud or a billboard or anything. Any of those little tricks are fine to begin with. Yeah,
this helps, I guess, whether we explain this or we don't. It may help to realize, hey, this is something that I'm aware of. It's not me. It's something that, you know, that it's externalized to awareness. Let's say it gets its power away.
Yeah. Something came up, but I'll try to remember in a second. It's not fully formed about what you just said. Oh, here's the other thing I want to say. Just to help folks who are doing this work on their own. I think I first recognized this when someone came to me in a session and he was trying to convince me that he was already awake, you know, like that there was much to look at. So I was just listening and listening. And then I heard that he spent a lot of time in his room, away from his family and away from a lot of things. So, you know, he was just like, well, obviously there's awareness here. I don't know if there's anything really to look at. It's like, you know, it feels very clear. And then all I said was, pull the picture of your wife and say you're good enough. And he's like, oh, No. So the point is I learned then that a lot of these inquiry styles in the past really innocently didn't do it in the context of relationship. So because we don't develop these triggers in a vacuum, we don't develop these triggers on a meditation mat where there's just space. We develop them in relationships, so they get developed. So just for those people who are doing it on their own, I think it's helpful, especially if you're working on something in the somatic body, to feel into it first and not try to be behind as awareness. Really, yes, aware of it, but feeling into it. Don't be afraid to feel into it, because there's information in there. And look at the person or the thing there that you're in. So if I'm not good enough, that didn't happen in a vacuum. Mom, I need to have mom up to really access that material. So that can help people, because if people are sitting at home, like on their meditation mat, not bringing mom in, dad in, wife in, or anybody, and they say, I'm good enough, they might get some material, but then you're going to get more when you normally when you pull in those pieces. I just wanted to say that, so because we didn't say it.
Yeah, it's important. It's almost like you say, oh, I'm it's easy for me to be real. It may be like, but then come to where it started, and it may evoke more residual material. And also I like how you did it in session. You can say, okay, feel into this contraction and look at your mom and say this. So this, like clinically speaking, it lightens up, it lightens up neuronal pathways in the brain. So there's a whole science behind that. Hey, I want to come back to reverse inquiry, and especially now talking to the Hakomi people. So what I found is interesting, because in the Hakomi things that you need the therapist to be in front of you and to tell you, Johnny, it's safe to love. But what I liked it that if, doing it with you, let's say you are saying it, but you are telling me, okay, or I work with people, I tell them, okay, I'm going to say this, but then I want you to say it. You say it. And so in this way, I say it. And actually, this may evoke even more material, because let's say the client comes to me and I tell them, hey, you are whole and complete just the way you are. And some of them may be like, yeah, man, that feels good. Yeah. But because I tell it to them, and there is like nourishment a little bit. But if they say it, it'll be like, bullshit,
Yeah.
And also this prepares the path for, they say it in a session, then they say it on the balcony, they say it by themselves. I mean, I was at the post office, I had to wait for some bullshit. So it's portable,
Yes.
I can do it by myself. I have a buddy, he's a Zen priest, and he's not familiar so much with your thing, but we exchange like peer support. I do some stuff on him, and then I told him, hey, David, here are the things that you need to ask them to me, So I like the fact that you are teaching and coaching to the point that they don't need you. So it's more like the method,
The best therapist or teacher is the one that works himself out of business, right? So taking that to this, because you look at the history of spiritual teachings, there have been great spiritual teachers, but one thing that hasn't happened a lot is empowering people, the people that come, to empower them with the tools. Because if you don't, if you're relying on me to probe or to suggest always, then you're not going to pick it up on your own. And there's a disempowerment in that, and then it can create a deficiency story, like I have to have the teacher, I have to have the therapist forever. But once you start recognizing, no, these are tools that you can bring right into your experience, you may still benefit from working with someone, for sure. That's a different experience, but you can now do it on your own. And then that takes care of some of the dependency. That's what issue was working on, dependency on teachers, facilitators, therapists. Even though it puts us out of business, it's more effective for people to be empowered in that way.
Yeah. I mean, even in regular psychotherapy world. It's like part of therapy is to end the therapy,
Yeah,
termination and stuff like that.
right.
How are you doing with time? You still have a little time?
I'm good if you are.
Okay, I'm
It's up
good.
to
Yeah,
you.
it's Saturday. Yeah, okay. So reverse inquiry. I want to stay with this. Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, you can work at the core once you identify a limiting belief, and you keep using the reverse inquiry, the probe, in order to evoke a new layer, until basically at some point, I mean, I noticed with myself that doesn't bring anything. Basically, I say that thing and my subconscious is like, yeah, bro, or it's like, it's yeah. So then it seems like that's the time to that. It doesn't seem to be anything at this point. We can go to other ones that bring more juice, right?
Yes. In fact, so that's exactly how I worked with my the nerve pain is working until something didn't have any juice anymore. Because once I saw the connection between, for example, anger, repression, and the pain, it didn't make sense to abandon that. It made sense to stay with it. So I hope I'm answering the question. Just we're going back to just staying with it. There's something I'm missing there in that question.
More like, well, like somebody say, well, until when do you do this? And this, like, you stop doing it when it's like you're saying it and it's neutral or positive.
Yes. So let's tie it into the somatic, because with the pain, what I was going to say was with the pain, I found that that is what I trust. The body is what I trust, because if a thought comes through, but there's no somatic response to it, then the body is not holding that anymore. So I trust that. So in the pain, I didn't really trust as much as what's going up here. I have to really ultimately trust the body, because
Yeah.
if there's something there that it's not physical, there may be another place to go with inquiry.
Yeah.
But the other thing is like once the anger, repression, or any inquiry runs out of its usefulness, you can't use it anymore. It doesn't work. So I cannot, whatever pain I may have, which is very minuscule now, I can't go back to anger, repression, inquiry. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
But there might be a couple of other things
Yeah.
that might. So trusting the body is how I know to go to those things. If I trust the mind will just say, "Well, keep doing anger, repression." If
Yeah.
not if you're
Yeah.
not, if the body's not. Yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted to say this, that sometimes you drop the probe or the reverse inquiry. Sorry if it's not politically correct. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Sometimes can be a thought coming up. Sometimes can be a contraction or a stirring or a sadness or something somatically, and sometimes can be both.
Yeah.
So, we talk now mostly about thought, but we both know that, it's equally important. Any pinching, knot, or wave. And sometimes I notice I did reverse inquiry myself. The mind will say nothing, but there will be something. And now we have these two options. There is something that is stuck or a contraction, or it's something like, ooh, and it goes. And so what I learned deeper working with you is that, the one that goes, that's okay, it goes, but the one that is like the so-called contraction, where it's not a perceived emotional flavor, but is distinct sensation contraction. And so here I a lot your teaching I appreciate is like, hey, don't just witness that and let it be as it is. That's an indicator. If it's a contraction or distinct sensation without feeling, it's an indicator that there is perhaps or most likely repressed feeling underneath. And so
Connected to repressed thoughts too, mind, body. Yeah.
yes, or yeah, that might be there. It's what we call a file. So that is not just a sensation. It's actually, it's a file, maybe some memory that has a meaning in it and some unfelt feelings. So coming back here to reverse inquiry, we can use reverse inquiry for other purposes. So that's why I want to go to the discussion now, not just to evoke and process limiting beliefs, But let's say, yeah, you had me do this. Let's say I have this contraction and it seems like there's nothing, it's mysterious, it's there. And then you had, it's a powerful, beautiful thing. Say, oh, I want to feel this fully. So again, using reverse inquiry to,
Meaning the feeling inside the contraction. So
yeah,
we can be, yeah,
yeah,
not the contraction because we already feel that. So
uh-huh,
so we're trying to get to the mind that has already decided it doesn't want to feel whatever emotion that's stuck in there. So
yeah,
that's why I say, if I say I want to feel the contraction, for me, it's like, well, yeah, it's right there. I may not want to feel it, but it's right there. There's
yeah,
nothing stopping that. But
yeah,
if you tell me I want to feel panic or an anger or rage coming out of that, if the mind has got that file
yeah,
there that already said, no, that's what we're trying to make
yeah,
contact with. That.
yeah. I mean, in my experience with myself and others, even that can be useful because most people, we have such deep mechanism of not wanting something unpleasant. So
Yeah.
we have some contraction and
Yes.
then there is resistance towards the contraction. So even if I say, I want to feel this fully, this is like, it's like what Rupert, sometimes Rupert talks about, Rupert Spira. He says when there is something like that, a trap can be that you're trying to get rid of it, and you're trying to get rid of it only maintains it, and you are using this non-duality with the secret agenda, like this welcoming, how I want to welcome it with the secret
Mm-hmm.
agenda to get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so he was saying to say this, can I feel this for the rest of my life? And then you need to get to the point to say yes,
Yeah.
because it means there's no resistance of the thing. But
Yeah.
coming back to you, to this contraction, when I did, I want to feel this fully. There are two options here. The mind may say, no, 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 it's going to kill you. If I feel this, I'm not going to go back to my kids to cook dinner or something. I had,
Mm-hmm.
so there will be, okay, option one. And then that is still useful because you can do this utility on it, right? What's the utility behind believing this? So it keeps moving the process along.
Mm-hmm.
Option two, I want to feel this fully. The mind is quiet and something happens. Some squirting of some more stuff,
Mm-hmm.
which I find very beautiful. If you can talk about it a little bit.
Well, the one I was going to say is like I sometimes skip over those. I did those inquiries that Rupert's talking about, those kinds of ways of looking. If there's an agenda. So when I first had the pain, there was the mind that says, I can't live with this. Like I need to do something to get rid of it. The resistance and the constant monitoring. You know, when you have pain, I don't
Yeah,
know if you've never had it, you don't know, but constant, almost addictive
yeah,
monitoring.
yeah,
So before I could even do the deeper trauma and repression work, I had to clear a lot of that. So there could be
yeah.
more rest with it. And my inquiries were like, I don't care if this ever goes away. And then
Mm-hmm.
be like, no, yeah, you do. Of course you do. But then to work on that level, then it came down to what Rupert's saying. Okay, now you don't have that same agenda with it.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's like, let's explore though what's there. Okay, because it's there for a reason. Even the contraction is there for a reason. It's not
Yes.
just, yeah,
Yeah, it's
unless
a
it's
file.
physical.
It's something
Yeah.
that, yeah, it's a file. Yeah, we need to open the Ziploc file.
So once the agenda gets relaxed a little bit and there's more resting with it, I think you can do this deeper work to explore, be curious about what is actually making it up. But you make a good point. I think you were making it, which is if we come down and we try to do that first, we may be coming from this thing that's just not at rest
Yeah,
with it,
yeah,
that mind. So there's a good
yeah.
few layers to work with
Yeah,
first.
I see people like, oh, because this somatic approach, even Hakomi, it's very effective at bringing stuff which is hidden. And then I can see people like, oh, that's like a lot. That's a lot. And I say, okay, just let it be. Just observe it scientifically, inch by inch, frame by frame. Uh, but they're still like, and so it helps to, okay, can you, like my Francis says sometimes, just can you take the burn? It's not going to kill you. Take the burn. Just let it devour you. You know,
Mhm.
of course, this doesn't work for, let's say, somebody who was in Iraq or
Trauma.
has been raped many
Yeah.
times, and then so because it's going to, but
Yeah.
it is true in some way,
Yeah. Yeah, because the mind says that thing, it's just like when people who are on the awakening path and they get close to sort of that recognition, or so to speak, and then the fear of death comes up. That's an example. I don't know what I was going to say about that. I kind of lost my thought.
That might be scary and devourable you.
Yes, the mind will say this fear is going to absolutely devour me, or whatever it's going to say. But
Yeah,
then as you take them through the inquiry and they recognize it wasn't anything like they thought, it might have been very uncomfortable, but nothing like the mind. So I
yeah,
think that's where coaches and teachers and
yeah,
facilitators come in really handy. People who traverse those places can say
yeah,
to you those things that it's
yeah,
not going to kill you.
yeah. I mean, there's this also, ideally, to have another nervous system in the room with you. This is a resource. Although I
Mhm.
work with you, we're not in the same room, but uh, there's a resource. Hearing your voice, hearing the facilitator, this creates safety.
Right.
Hearing the voice and modulate, and so that, yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. This is meant to be done by oneself ultimately, but ultimately it's not going to go so well until you work with someone first, honestly,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think so. I do.
Coming back to reverse inquiry here, what I can see that many uses, like we just talked about the anger repression, or fear repression, or shame repression, or love repression, uh,
How about
like
dissociation? Dissociation.
dissociation repression.
Well, disassociation. I guess there's
Oh,
repression involved, but you know
okay.
how people, I think you even mentioned a question like that, where someone
Yeah,
just feels like they go out of their body to protect themselves. So you can do that, like just a simple, I want to feel into my body. And then
yeah,
the extent to which the mind is involved in dissociation will produce the thoughts there.
yeah,
So you can see
yes.
them. And then
Yeah,
it's easier to
so
go into the body.
that was my point, that basically you are very creative using the probe or reverse inquiry uh, to just move the process forward, to keep eliciting unconscious material. And that's what the more I did it, the more I started to be creative in the middle of it, not just to have my list, but as something comes up to reverse that, and
Hmm.
something comes up to reverse that.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to point out to maybe some Hakomi practitioners listening to this. Like, for instance, there's nothing I'm ashamed of. There's nothing I'm ashamed of. There's absolutely nothing that I'm hiding from anybody. Yeah, this will stir a lot of stuff for me if I were to stay
Most
with
people.
it. But usually I don't think about shame at all. Yeah, I'm cool, it's all good. Or so this is meant to save a lot of time to evoke this material. Although I guess maybe some psychotherapists, they don't want to save time. uh, Also, this self-sabotage, I remember that. Yeah, I'm just talking about the many many areas one can use reverse inquiries. I
Yeah.
remember at the beginning of the corona, you had this because people were freaking out because of the TV and all this and Facebook, and you again to you had this corona inquiry, which I copied you with and did it with people. I am not afraid of corona. I don't, I'm comfortable not knowing what's going to happen. And so this will bring actually the fear of the, I like that
Yeah.
they say to process subconscious fear, so then you can more like function more properly.
Yes. Well, speaking of all the civil unrest and the politics, I had a lot of sessions, you probably did too, in the year of COVID and the Trump thing, where people were either very anti-Trump or anti-Biden or anti-somebody or something. And so people, I think we often think that we have to be really for or against something, like truly identified with it, even to vote or to have an opinion. But as you wake up, you recognize you can still have preferences and you can vote.
Yeah,
You don't have to be strongly identified, or you don't have to like live out your trauma with every
yeah,
politician. So what I would do is like bring Trump up and just say he's the most gracious, vulnerable, open human being in the world, and be like, no. But it helped them because they got to confront things that really didn't have anything to do with Trump, had to do with their own belief systems about the world, about themselves. And then after they still don't maybe want to vote for Trump, but they see it differently. So you can use it for all sorts of things. It's not just like I've used it on ancestral trauma, on collective. Ancestral is like just going into sitting with my family on both sides. So going into my mom's family, like imagining myself in the room with those people and listening for the language of that family, like listening to the signals that are being sent, even that aren't coming out of the mouths of people. So it's an energetic thing. And if you're empathic, you can really feel into it even more, because you learn when you're empathic as a kid to pick up a lot of information that isn't verbal. So sitting in my family, visualizing my grandmother, my grandpa, my mom, her sisters, and her brother, it's like I just sat there for a second trying to translate what's a core belief of this family, that how do the people in this family survive? And what came up is like, well, you just don't show emotion. So it showed me, one, that a lot of my repression came from them, either passed down or genetics or otherwise. And by going into that, I got a lot of insight into how my repression came about, but also how to see through it. Because, well, just going into it, so it's like if you can't feel anything in this family, or you can't express anything, then I'm going to look at this family, I'm going to have them all up, and I'm going to say, I can sit here and be joyful and loving and open, or even angry here, and then just using it in that context. It's the same inquiry, but just different context is all it is.
Wow. Because when you did this, I just I was raised in totalitarian regime, and people suffered in my family. So there was this, oh, be careful, don't stick out. Just be cautious, be careful, don't trust them, don't stick out, don't talk, don't so I guess all that comes up, and then allow the file to open up and then reverse it to kind of milk more, right?
Okay. I mean, we're using with a lot of people, like on intergenerational stuff, trauma, codependency, because you learn messages from a family, they get passed down about your views of addiction, for example, are not necessarily yours or your even families. They come from, sometimes. So like
justifications or
or how you see things. Like, so just once you see that this is a viewpoint that your whole family held, that it was passed down to you, then you can just go into it then. And then even just because it was passed down doesn't mean it's solid, that it's permanent. It's inquirable, like everything else. Most of the time, most of the stuff is inquirable, but you have to find it first. That's the thing. If you don't find it, it just hangs out there and plays on you. But if you find it in your awareness, you can go into inquiry, reverse inquiry around it.
So with the reverse inquiry, we are bringing full consciousness deficiency identities, and we diminish them. There's deficiency identity story, it creates self-sabotage. So you did some videos like, hey, you can do a lot of law of attraction. And I mean, I don't know if you said this, but what's what I got. You can I can visualize my motorcycle and whatever, my boat, I can visualize this. Thank you, whatever. I can do all kind of Abraham Hicks, a law of attraction thing, but it's not going to work if I have subconscious deficiency story about money, about worth, about success. So
this is how I talk about it. That's exactly what I said, but sometimes I say it this way. The deficiency story, if you look at what it is, it literally has to sabotage. There's no other way that the deficiency story can survive, until it has to look out into the world and into the future and see more of the same. And if it doesn't, it's very threatening, actually. So recognizing that if you have a deficiency story, you most likely have sabotage, because they go together, because the one allows the other to happen. And then so that can open people's eyes to go, because people, I think sabotage is an unconscious thing, as you know. And so if you don't know how to inquire into it, it'll just keep sabotaging. But if you have a deficiency story, let me give the viewers a little way into this. Let's say your deficiency story is, I'm not good enough, or I'll never be successful or whatever it is, just visualize yourself just in the way they do with The Secret. Like, okay, visualize yourself
Yeah.
with
The
everything is
ideal
happening for
vision.
you.
Yeah. The
Yeah,
ideal, perfect, wonderful. Yeah.
right. But instead of just sort of trying to sort of manifest that some way,
And to feel
remove the
as if you got
blocks.
it.
Yeah, remove the blocks. So say nothing stands in the way of my of achieving that, of being that, and then you'll start to see
Yes.
the yeah.
Yeah. I've done. I remember that you came with this, and yeah, the client, he was like, "Oh man, I'm just going to start this business. It's going to be cool. It's going to be great." And I'm like, "Okay, let's see. Can you like that make your asha?" And then I'll say, "There's nothing that stands in the way of me being successful with this." And right away, something will come. Something will come. So yeah, that's very. And the same with relationships. I did yesterday with someone. I asked
Yeah.
them. Actually, I learned this from. Laura, Francis Lucille's wife, Laura Lucille, who is a teacher too. And actually, I appreciate her a lot because she studied with Robert Adams and Lester Levinson. And Lester was very much a lot of chronic pain, almost died. And when he was 40. So he realized because a lot of repressed stuff, actually, this was in the 70s and 80s. So part of Laura's teaching is that resting as awareness, pointing to awareness, but then it's stirring shit and processing it. And anyway, my point was that in the middle of the client talking about how terrible it is something, or how bad it is or something, she would say, okay, but what do you want? What do you want? And it'll be like, oh, I want to have a, I want to have a loving, growthful, sweet partnership. She'll be like, okay. And she would say this, which is again a little reverse inquiry, but you took it, you can say, I allow myself to have this loving, wonderful partnership. And then see if anything comes as an objection,
That's nice. Yeah, it's
She's
the same
doing that.
thing.
But you can ramp it up. I could ramp it up to say, okay, I am worthy of having this relationship, or
I deserve it.
Yeah. Or if you want all the way, there's nothing that stands in the way of
Yeah,
me. Yeah.
it will happen. Yeah.
Yes.
That's good. Turning up the heat with those
Yeah.
different inquiries. Yeah, good. We do that with shame too, because you mentioned that because of how shame hides.
Mhm.
Like you mentioned that we could go out our whole life without being conscious of some of
Mhm.
these shame thoughts.
Yeah.
So we enter in like with a softball pitch in a sense, like it's a soft pitch, which is, well, it may not feel soft, but starting off with, I'm not ashamed of anything. That might feel like not a soft one. There might be a
Uh-huh.
softer one,
Mhm.
but we graduate to, like, for example, if I'm working with someone who's watching porn, I know I've shared this before. I'll say, okay, imagine yourself watching porn. Now, I want everyone everywhere to see what I'm doing.
Okay.
So just turning up the
Yeah.
heat there. Another one is like if I'm working with people who have a lot of conflict avoidance, so they've got issues with people, but they're stagnant. They're not in business, for example. They're not reaching out because they're stagnant, avoiding conflict. So we might start with a soft pitch, like, um, I don't need to avoid conflict anymore, whatever it is.
Mhm.
But then we kind of keep amping it up. And one of the last ones is like, I'm going to go call all of these people right after the session. And like that is because you turned up the heat, it will really bring it up, because it's nice to just think about it in a way like, oh yeah, maybe someday I'll call those people. That feels safe. But if you say I'm going to do it right now after the session, then that can bring up a deeper layer. You can use that with any reverse inquiry, just turning it, like titrating up the heat a little bit each
Yeah.
time.
And we are not doing this because we are some non-dual sadomasochists. Yeah. It's
No.
just that we evoke this stuff, which it takes a lot of energy to manage, and it creates pain. And actually, I'm still going to non-dual retreats, and without really arrogance or something, but I can smell it almost. These wonderful advanced students that are asking some deeply cerebral question into the nature of the nature of nature of consciousness. But man, there's there's just wounds. This is just like
Yeah.
trauma wounds, and then
Yeah.
I feel bad about that. So yeah.
Yeah, that happens a lot, actually. I mean, I just remember having a talk with someone who went into that all that really intellectual and stuff and asking me questions and also giving me a bunch of information about all the big constructs of the world. And then I just said, well, but how do you feel about yourself? And then hmm, the truth
Yeah.
comes out. I hate myself.
Mm.
So let's
Yeah.
focus on that
Yeah.
instead of the nature of the nature of the nature of all
Yeah.
this stuff.
Yeah.
Because it might not matter once you deal with some of this pain. Some of these questions might not matter anymore, like you say.
Mhm.
They matter because it's a good way to stay out of the
Mhm.
pain in the body, is what I feel. So,
Mhm.
and we all do it to a certain degree.
Yeah. You know, I could see that this work, I mean, or Hakomi, or this work, KI, this approach can be useful. I mean, it's useful for diminishing suffering for people who are interested in awakening, or they had awakening, or
Mhm.
awakening in this non-dual tradition refers to that one has had some experiential revelation about what we are. It's not just some state, some ooh,
Mhm.
in love and God. No, that's also cool, but that's so some yeah. So that's, and they say, I mean, in this direct path, that this awakening to what we are is more like less than half of the way. There's not liberation from suffering.
Right.
So basically, for people who had this, revelation about what we are, then the next leg, they call it like post awakening sadhana, or embodiment. So the ki and this processing can help with the embodiment.
Mhm.
At the same time, one can still do this ki approach uh, before awakening,
Yes.
or even if one is not interested in awakening.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Because the simple fact is the things that we believe, the programs are, like you said, creating pain. So most people are interested in not suffering, even if they're not
Yeah,
interested in awakening. They may not want to go all the way with it, but that's what the draw is because it actually does relieve the suffering. And so that's
yeah,
why it's attractive to different people for different reasons
yeah.
in different places. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. It was all born as an embodiment approach because it was all born after my awakening and then realizing what you're saying, which is like halfway. Okay.
Yeah.
There's still some stuff here. So developed it in the post-awakening embodiment process. So that's why I think people find it useful because it was developed from that.
Yes.
But then you can also apply it in these other areas.
Yes. Okay, so I think people like it if it's not too long. In this
Yeah.
age, it's it's not like Socrates and Plato talking for hours. So uh, I would love to continue this. There's much more to talk about, even reverse inquiry and application on addiction. And actually, I recommend, and I will perhaps put in the below this video some links to some great videos from Scott on there's one addiction to separation and return to wholeness, where you outline very clearly the working with addiction and a lot of reverse inquiries. There's another one on the way out of porn. I have people that so yeah, I'll put some links in this thing and some short links on reverse inquiry from you. But Scott, if you want to share now anything, like what, I know you have these Saturday calls, and then you are training facilitators. Can you share a little bit what are you doing, or what sources are available, or anything you want to share for people who want to do something about what we talked about?
Hmm. So I do sessions with people. My facilitators do sessions with people. You can find us at killaby.com and just go to the drop down menu and you'll see find a facilitator. If you go to my Facebook page, at the very top is the Keo series, and that's just about 37 short videos where I explain KI. Just it doesn't go deep into any particular thing, but it's a great way to learn the work that way and start it on your own. Top of my page, you'll see that post pinned at the top. I also have a link tree, if you can find it right on my page, because it gives you access to most everything that we offer, including training. You can become a facilitator of this work and work with people out in the world. YouTube and Facebook Live, as you know, I'm just giving a lot of it. I'm just coming on all the
Yes.
time because I learned during my chronic pain and the repression that support is so important in this level, this dimension, because all kinds of things can come up. Anger, for example, fear, panic, trauma. And we need to learn and be in a conversation with each other during that so that we can support each other, because it can feel isolating to start opening up something if you don't have that. So I'm just getting out there and speaking about it without charging anything, just so people will come and get the support. So if you don't have money, just come and listen to the Facebook Live or go to my YouTube channel and pick up some of that there. And then the weekly meetings every Saturday morning, you're going to probably post a link to that. I don't know. But that's for people who are doing the somatic dimension of the work mainly. I don't want to open it up just to everyone right now. Most people who are doing like this, like they're working with some emotional repression or trauma, like held in the body or body contraction. I'm using those calls to support people in that work. And I might open it up to a bigger group, but really for those people who come, they should be doing that kind of work using our work, because it's going to be focused on that mainly. Saturday mornings at 7 a.m. You can find that link usually every Friday on my
7
Facebook page.
a.m. California time.
And one other thing, if you need treatment, we do have treatment center. We used to have 2. Now we have 1, the Kilby Center for Recovery, where we do this work, higher level of care, documentation, assessment, independent assessments of how you're doing, not just us assessing you. That's at kilbycenter.com. If you need a higher level, that's for people with addictions, but also in crises, like various crises around trauma, spiritual seeking, spiritual crises. People come to us when one session a week or working on their own just is not enough to get through what they're going through.
All right.
Thank you for letting me say all that.
Yeah, thank you, Scott, and may it benefit everyone who is interested. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.